To the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners Budget Work Session number 9. Today's meeting is a hybrid board meeting. Some presenters and guests will appear in person and some will appear virtually. For those presenting virtually, please mute your mic when not speaking. When presenting, make sure to unmute your mic and turn on your camera. For all presenters, don't forget to state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. Today's first work session is our first one for the Health Department, so it's going to be the Health Department overview and the Director's Office. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Valdez Bravo, and I use he, him, his pronouns. I have the privilege of serving as interim director of the Multnomah County Health Department. Hello, Chair Vega Peterson, members of the board, Commissioners Myron, Jayapal, Rosenbaum, and Stegman. It's a pleasure and honor to be here today alongside my colleagues to present the Health Department's FY24 budget. Our hope today is not only to present our FY24 budget, but to provide insights into how and why we arrived at this budget. At the end of this presentation, our goal is for you to know the Health Department's priorities for FY24, our strategies and approach to solving the monumental challenges our community faces, to illustrate the resources allocated to these strategies, and to speak to how we in the Health Department plan to measure success. But before we go further, I'd like to thank Chair Vega Peterson and her team for the support in this year's budget formulation, including but not limited to Chris Fick, April Roman, Ash Manning, and Christian Elkin. And I personally would like to thank the Health Department leadership team and their staff for the strategic thinking, intentionality, equity lens, teamwork, and tireless efforts to hone this budget and make it what our community not only needs, but deserves. And a special shout out to Trista Zugel-Bensel and Maggie McAvoy for their assistance in crafting these presentations. Next slide. Okay, so here's the agenda. Oh, we'll go previous slide, sorry. Here's the agenda that we'll walk through today. After I conclude with this introduction, we will hear from the Community Budget Advisory Committee. Then we will review the department budget overview, and I'll discuss our approach and how we incorporated equity into our process and decision making. We'll then conduct a budget overview by division. And please note that each division will have their own dedicated time to review their division-specific budgets. So today we'll be taking a high-level look at the divisions: behavioral health, corrections health, the health officers group, integrated clinical services, and public health. And note that as we go forward today, but mostly on Tuesday, a lot of our leaders, this is going to be their first time presenting to you all. And so thank you for the grace. After that, we'll cover our general fund reductions, followed by our new one-time only and backfill general fund reallocations. And finally, we'll end with a look at our state, federal impacts and other policy issues, as well as a brief discussion about the COVID-19 and American Rescue Plan programs. And I do hope to have plenty of time for questions at the end. But first, I'd like to hand it off to Rosalie Lee of the Community Budget Advisory Committee, who will be presenting information about the CBAC's feedback on the FY24 Health Department proposed budget. Rosalie.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. So I've had the opportunity to meet some of you folks in my training as a CBAC member, and so it's a pleasure to be in this space and to represent the Community Budget Advisory Committee for the Health Department. So if we could go to the next slide. So these are the members of our CBAC for the Health Department, wonderful, amazing people that have worked in healthcare and community service in a multitude of ways. Next slide, please. We are committee we considered all the out-of-target program offers. Our guiding values are we're transformative leaders. We offer expert knowledge, uphold racial justice. We operate with dignity and respect. We believe in intercultural intelligence, and we hold all these ethics at our core. So we reviewed 16 out of target programs, and we were able to go through a process. We were able to put them in order. And so if you could go to the next slide. Most of our recommendations for these program offers, we tried to center direct service as one of the guiding principles in terms of how we pick the programs. Additionally, taking into consideration all the turnover within the health department and the needs of staff and how all those things work in culmination together. And so with the offers, I'd like to highlight, I've spent, I believe, 17 years in mental health and addictions. I went on to research and then did pediatric clinical intervention at OHSU, and then I'm working on a attaining a PhD in economic mobility and strategy. And so with that, a lot of this, when I think of the strategy that you guys are talking about, we're trying to make sure that we're utilizing these resources the best that we can. And often I would imagine that we don't see the ARPA funding quite often. So we're trying to make sure that we can utilize that money the best that we can with these program offers. So with that said, I had the opportunity to serve families that have been impacted by gun violence at OHSU, and we were piecemealing a lot of the resources and money available to be able to support the families, not only behaviorally, but also just through intervention and how we could get them to additionally a better place. A lot of the resources, we were literally piecemealing a lot of that stuff together. And so I would like to recommend our 6th recommendation for 401.99Q, gun violence impacted families, behavioral health team. And I think that, I think it's kind of similar to what I've seen with the programs or the interventions that we have run at the hospital. And I know that within that, this is an evidence-based program. So it's, I've seen the kind of like a similar makeup of the program that's currently being offered, and I would like to just extend that recommendation, strongly recommend that program, just because there is nothing, I think, sufficient to be able to really support families in need. Additionally, the 10, I think we have a little mix up, but one of the recommendations was, let me see if I could pull it up. $440B, technical support for community-based organizations. And why I would love to talk more about that is just with the understanding that businesses, nonprofit, and just kind of they're experiencing the same issues that we're seeing, I think just generally within most sectors and industries, of just not able to retain employees and things of that nature. And we have a lot of technology that is currently coming out that can support community-based organizations and their ability to grow their capacity. And then with the work that we're trying to do with program offers that we have seen before with the health department is to partner with these community-based organizations to make sure that they have all of the supports that they need, both technical and through sweat equity, that they're able to flourish and able to do the work that we need to serve communities. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rosalie. Appreciate the work that you and the whole Health Department CBAC have done.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Rosalie, and to all members of the Health CBAC.
And Rosalie, you're welcome to have a seat in the audience, so you don't need to stay up there if you have things to do. Thank you.
So the Multnomah County Health Department, as you know, is the largest public health department and safety net provider in Oregon. The Multnomah County Health Department acts as both the local public health authority, or LPHA, and local mental health authority, LMHA, and operates the largest federally qualified health center, FQHC, program in the state. The health department's work is anchored in the vision of thriving communities that nurture the health and resilience of all, and the mission that we work with communities to advance health equity, protect the most vulnerable, and promote health and wellness for everyone. Our values are compassion and care, empowerment, racial equity, connection, and integrity. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhuman because it often results in physical death." The health department acknowledges that racism is a public health crisis, that racism negatively affects the health of many who live in our county, and we continue our active commitment to accelerating progress towards eliminating racial inequities. The health department leads inclusively with race in recognition that systematic racism and inequalities have had disproportionate health impacts on our communities of color. We also know that other groups of people continue to be marginalized based on many categories, including gender, sexual orientation, ability, and age, to name but a few. Because race intersects across all these categories, if we center race at the heart of our work, we'll be able to make improvements across intersectional identities. We provide quality of care to our most vulnerable populations, including people who are vulnerable or impacted by homelessness, individuals housed in the county's jails and juvenile detention centers, and people facing severe and complex behavioral health challenges. Our core values affirm our commitment to serve with compassion and care, further connection and belonging, lead with that integrity, uplift community-driven solutions, and accelerate our progress in eliminating racial inequities. The graphic on this slide is meant to convey the key overarching approach we're taking at the health department, and that is a one-department approach. And what that means is that although we're a health department made up of 5 unique clinical divisions and 2 support divisions, we approach problem-solving, strategy, communication, and support our staff and the communities we serve with a one-department mindset. Rather than operating in silos, we operate intersectionally, and with mutual reinforcing support of the various missions our divisions are entrusted with, tackling the very big challenges of the day as one organization while respecting and leveraging the differences and specificity of each unique division. And while we only have one public health division, our entire health department takes a public health approach. The second overarching theme is that the health department focuses on upstream preventions. So whether in the classrooms or in the streets or Zoom or an exam room, we seek to implement prevention and health promotion strategies at a policy, systems, and environmental level, focusing on leading causes of death across the lifespan. Our program offers are designed to improve health outcomes and health equity, reaffirming our long-term commitment to rectify race-based inequities. This year, the health department's budget submission totals $448 million for both in and out of target programs and supports the work of 1595.20 full-time employees. The proposed budget is a result of countless hours of work from our health department budget team, finance and business management team, budget liaisons, department leadership, and many others who contributed to the development of budget narratives, the transmittal letter itself, and financial detail. A special thanks to Wendy Lear, our Deputy Director of Finance and Business Management, who has led this process for our department for many years. With our department in a time of transition, Wendy's steadiness and deep knowledge of the budgeting process was essential this year more than ever. And thank you also to Trista Zugel-Bensel, who served as our health budget manager for the first time. So key features you will see throughout Health's FY24 budget presentation are ensuring access to affordable, high-quality medical and behavioral health care services, especially for our racially and ethnically diverse and economically vulnerable populations. We lean into our strategic, comprehensive, urgent response to the opioid epidemic using the aforementioned one-department approach. And we will continue to foster enhanced community partnerships, prioritizing culturally specific programs, policies, and services. To accomplish all of this, we will continue to work to rebuild and stabilize the workforce through wide recruitment, outreach efforts to servant leadership meant to engage and retain the talented, passionate, highly committed employees that do this work every day. Next slide. The health department's budget prioritizes resources, programming, and staffing aimed at addressing the county's leading causes of death, injury, and illness, including both direct services and prevention services. FY24 represents the department's first post-pandemic budget, marking the first year in several that budget size and program scope is scaled to pre-pandemic service levels. In order to submit a budget that is strategic, aligns with department values, addresses the chair's priorities, and demonstrates good stewardship of county resources, the health department revised its budgeting process. Historically, the department allocated CGF, or county general funds, to each division based on their current service levels. Then there was a variable constraint, some divisions taking a deeper cut than others, or taking across-the-board reductions. And then division directors developed their budgets in whatever manner they chose. This naturally created variability in approach, strategy, and outcome with little cross-divisional collaboration. This year, the health department took this post-pandemic opportunity to work with senior leaders to budget across divisional boundaries and elevate overall stewardship of safety net services. We work collaboratively using a one-department strategy to identify areas for savings and prioritize funding for the new fiscal year. The goals of the approach are to maximize federal-state funding first, optimize the use of CGF and prevent reductions in divisions that had few or no other sources of funding, and to submit coordinated out-of-target requests. American Rescue Plan out-of-target requests have been kept narrow and directed toward projects or programs that can be delivered in the coming year and what the department should continue beyond in FY24. As you can see on this slide, the health department's scope of work is vast. Extreme climate conditions, housing insecurity and houselessness, community violence, traffic injury and death, substance use and overdose, chronic conditions, behavioral health conditions, and infectious diseases. Our mission of working with communities to advance health equity, protect the most vulnerable, and promote health and wellness for everyone naturally intersects with the chair's priorities of meeting the needs of people vulnerable to or impacted by homelessness, enhancing community safety, climate resilience, and bolstering behavioral health supports and strengthening workforce equity. And while I realize that the problems on this slide are bigger than any one health department or even one county, and it's going to take a whole community, city, state, or federal approach, what I reassure the folks at the health department is that although it is bigger than us, I know that we will be leading this work because we are grounded in the community and in the LMHA and LPHA. You may notice that COVID-19 isn't on this slide. As we presented to the board in February, the pandemic has shifted and we're no longer experiencing an acute public health emergency. The federal government ended the declared PHE on May 11th, and the World Health Organization has now lifted the public health emergency of international concern. However, it is important to note that we continue to address COVID-19 as part of our infectious disease prevention and treatment activities, as well as within our chronic condition response, as folks continue to live with long COVID. Next slide. Now, at the start of this presentation, I covered who we are and what we do in our mission, vision, and values. But as they say, a vision without execution is only a dream. So now we're going to move into how we plan to work towards executing that vision in FY24. So far, we've laid out our approach to budget formulation this year. We've illustrated the vast scope of work that we perform in the service of community, and we've illustrated many of the key challenges and domains that we have identified as focal points in FY24. Next, our interim deputy director of operations, Chantel Reed, will illustrate how we have operationalized the strategic one-department approach into strategic investments and actions meant to directly address the needs of our community. Chantel?
Good morning. Thank you, Valdez. Good morning, Commissioner Baker-Peterson, commissioners. My name is Chantel Reed. I am the interim deputy director of operations. I'm very pleased to be here this morning to really talk about your investment in the deputy director of operations position within the health department. This was an investment well before I got here, and I'm very pleased to be working in this capacity. Throughout COVID, it was recognized that this was an integral position to really support the infrastructure of the health department, to support the clinical operations and the direct services within the health department. We are in a phase where we're emphasizing our collaborative approach in our operations across divisions. We recognize that we won't all do things together the same way, but it is important that we all work together to do it the county way and how we approach our policies. Procedurally, there are going to be differences, how we do clinical operations, how we do services within the community, how we do services within specifically in different divisions across the department. But it is important that we ensure that there is continuity in our policies so that we can make sure that the foundational approach is consistent. COVID, of course, was the ultimate test of our agility. We came out of the height of the pandemic more nimble and ready to move the department and the community into the future of public health. When I say public health, I mean population health, community health, social determinants of health, physical health, all those factors that impact how we live, work, learn, and play in our community. The fundamentals of that are how we are addressing reinforcement of our foundational infrastructure. As you can see in this slide, the foundation of our infrastructure of the health department, of our staff, operations is critical in order to ensure that our clinical operations, our retention and recruitment, accreditation is necessary in order for us to drive the future of public health. We are working towards standardization of our practices, ensuring that we embed accreditation, moving towards accreditation, and making sure that we are routinized across the board. Next slide. So to achieve that, the foundational and strategic goals, we have centered our budget priorities primarily around addressing the leading causes of death, injury, and illness, and recovery and growth from the pandemic. We have devised strategies to address behavioral health, illicit substance use, and community safety through evidence-based preventative measures, with the equity lens leading with race at the forefront. Our goal is to ensure that there are through lines through each divisional strategy to maximize our effectiveness and ensure cohesion within the department. Our recovery is based on that structural foundation. We've seen that there's a need to support CBOs, there's a need to support our community partners, but in order to do that, we have to ensure that our operationalizing our budget perspectives are embedded into how we are responsive to the community needs. Next slide. I won't go into detail, especially because we're under the time constraints, but slides 9 through 10 exceptionally highlight how we've looked at new investments in our strategic priorities. They highlight gun violence, they highlight our behavioral health investments, they highlight infrastructure investments. Slide 10, skip to the next slide, please. Also highlights in-town, our Old Town InReach Behavioral Health Resource Center and some of our corrections health augmentation. Specifically also partial funding of our medical examiner state backfill. Next slide. I'm proud to present this particular slide because it represents the intentionality of the county and the health department to invest and work towards health equity in our community. I acknowledge that we still have work to do, but we are making sure that there is an equity lens in our workforce, in our experiences, and our culture. We have strategically redeveloped our workforce to increase the capacity and foster greater sustainability in our community and overall infrastructure. We have been working specifically to fill positions to increase equity across the board as it relates to racial equity, as it relates to differences, LGBTQ community, and across the board. We operate in recognizing that our mission is to serve the people across all of Multnomah County. Next slide. So here, this particular slide represents the distribution of our staffing. Again, most notably within our operations department, which reflects the consolidation of our HR, HDAC, communications, quality, and primary operations team. This structure provides for a more efficient delivery of service in the largest department in the county. It is proving to be an operational efficiency across the board. I am pleased to be supporting the department in this capacity. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy Lear, our Deputy Director of Finance and Business Services.
Thank you, Chantel.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Wendy Lear, Health Department Deputy Director over Finance and Business Management. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is just our some of the standard slides you'll see from everyone. This is our budget by division, and the size, relative size of the divisions in the Health Department have been pretty consistent over the years, so no significant changes in this area. Next slide. This is our budget by fund, and as you can see, we have three primary funds within the Health Department, the General Fund, the Federal and State Fund, and the new Federally Qualified Health Center FQHC Enterprise Fund. Our funds, this year, the General Fund grew by about 10%, which was a combination of cost of living as well as significant investments by the chair in corrections health and behavioral health, which you'll hear more about shortly. Next slide. This is our significant trends, 6-year significant trends by fund. And here too, the growth trend for 2019 through 2021, if you remove the ARPA funding, was really in a flat or declining state. So pre-pandemic and into the pandemic, aside from ARPA, we were in a declining budget state. But for the last 3 years, again, excluding the ARPA funding, we have seen a steady growth of between 6 and 11% year over year. For this year, some of the growth is attributed to incremental increases in the county general fund and in federal and state funding. But by and large, the largest contributing factor is the Federally Qualified Health Center. Our community health centers had a change in scope, which resulted in an increase in the fees that they receive for medical and dental services. And that contributed to the largest portion of growth in our budget over the last 3 years. The other visual change you'll see in this slide is the creation of that enterprise fund. It was created in fiscal year 23, and it moved funding from the federal and state fund and the general fund into that new enterprise fund. So not a growth change, but a reorganization of funds. So next slide. This is our 6-year personnel trending, and personnel trending has been really flat over the last 6 years. Again, if you exclude the fluctuation in temporary personnel added with ARPA funding. This year, if you look compared to fiscal year 23, fiscal year 24 is flat in terms of FTE growth. But what has changed is if you remove the ARPA-funded positions this year and next year, we've added more long-term funded positions. So this coming year's budget represents an increase in long-term positions, and those are primarily in corrections health, which you'll hear more about shortly, and in the behavioral health program that added personnel to their crisis call center and to their coordinated diversion team. So next slide. This is the budget by cost category. Again, proportionately, there isn't any significant change between this year and next year. And the only thing to note that I thought I might mention is the Behavioral Health Division is largely contractual services, and they make up 70% of the $84 million the Health Department spends in contracts. So most of those are behavioral health contracts. Next slide. Okay. In this section coming up, we're going to be only focusing on the infrastructure divisional changes, so Director's Office, Finance and Business Management, and Operations. But for your reference, we've included an appendix to this presentation that includes all of the reductions in the Health Department, all of the reallocations, and all of the new funding so that you have a single source for a comprehensive look should you want it. But we're not going to cover it today. So I will turn it over to Valdez.
All right. Thanks so much, Wendy. Next slide. So the director's office is a very small team at the large health department. As you can see here, from year to year, we declined from 7.2 million to 4.7 million. I'll touch on that reason in the next slide. That's the big so what there. And then we went down several staff members, and I'll talk about that next slide. So the decline in the money side of things was the fact that we had $2 million. It was a one-time only that went to support Rockwood, so that is no longer in the director's budget. So that's why you saw that dramatic drop, as well as we in FY24 created the new deputy director of operations position, and some of the in the realignment of that structures, several of the staff were realigned under the deputy director of operations. So there was a change there as well. So the only real changes substantially in the director's office were that move of that Rockwood capital money, and then the realignment of a little over 3 staff to the Deputy Director of Operations. All right, next up. And I'll hand it up to Chantel.
This is just a reflective of a shift from the director's office to the operations office in making this a self-sustaining department and standalone. There's not a significant enough to report here specifically. It really is just a shift. Next slide. And here it is outlined. I spoke to it in a previous slide. It is human resources, it's HDAT team, communications, office support, and then learning and development. Next slide. FBM.
Thank you. So the Finance and Business Management Division 2 has remained relatively flat. Next slide. We do have a couple of significant changes, operational changes. One is to note that we've added 2 positions to support our medical accounts receivable or medical billing team. We've been relying on higher cost contractual employees to keep up with the increase in workload in medical claims and medical billing. And adding these 2 positions will allow us to kind of maintain our current efficiency and capacity, but at a lower cost. And then we received one-time only funding this year for 2 positions to support the Behavioral Health Division, which is planning to transition from the Evolve system to using the Epic Ocean system for their medical behavioral health claims processing. And so this is an improvement that we're very excited about, and it will mean the entire health department, corrections health, behavioral health, our community health centers, and public health, including the health officer, will all be utilizing Epic for both practice management and in many instances for the electronic health record capacity as well. Next slide. You can skip this slide too, thank you. So again, we're only going to focus on the general fund reductions that happened in the infrastructure areas. And so this Valdez has spoken at length about the one department approach to our budgeting, so I'm not going to go over it here as well. But in the director's office, there was a reduction to some professional services to address underutilization. And in finance and business management, we cut 2 positions. One was a front desk receptionist at the McCoy building, and the other was a accounts payable position. In both instances, those were vacancies, and in operations as well, in Chantel's area, a position was cut that was vacant, and with changes in business need, they didn't believe the position would be needed in the future. So next slide. So then in total, the health department took general fund reductions of $1.3 million, and the divisions will address their reductions in their presentation. So next slide. The next couple of slides are reductions that the department took of just over $1.7 million so that we could reinvest in other parts of the department or even within the same division. This is the kind of one department approach that Valdez spoke to, where we asked divisions to take deeper cuts that they needed to meet constraint so that we could see where there were efficiencies in some areas that could help support funding deficiencies in other areas. And so in the infrastructure areas, this resulted in the director's office reducing even further the professional services, so more than that they needed to meet constraint, but they could reduce that area even further. Human resources cut 2 positions, including an office assistant and a human resources consultation position. In one instance, it was a vacancy, and in the other, they didn't have sufficient workload to justify a full-time position, so that work was redistributed and the position cut. And then in the operations area, they cut a vacant position that was vacant as a result of restructuring. Next slide, please. And then those reductions that were taken across the board were then reallocated across the board. And some of those reallocations included the infrastructure areas. And so I already spoke to the medical billing staff, the 2 positions that were added with these new savings. And in operations, they added an administrative analyst to support the deputy director position, and they also added a communications coordinator to the ongoing budget. And then in finance and business management, there was also a contracts and procurement associate to assist with processing the more than 700 contracts that we manage every year. There was a budget analyst position added to support behavioral health and corrections health. And then lastly, an additional financial reporting position, increasing the team from 1 to 2 to increase our capacity to do financial reporting and analysis. Next slide. And then aside from the department-wide reallocations, the general fund corrections health did some internal reallocations as well, and you'll hear from them shortly. So next slide. In terms of new one-time only or backfilled positions in the infrastructure area, the only addition is the two positions in finance and business management, which I spoke to, that are one-time only to support the transition of behavioral health from Epic, or to Epic from Evolve, their current medical billing system. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Valdez.
All right, thanks so much, Wendy. So, that's we're kind of taking a look at our county general fund, but let's talk about COVID-19, our American Rescue Plan update. So, as you know, and as we talked about at the beginning of this presentation, we are moving to be that post-pandemic world. So, we are ramping down many of the public health interventions that were directly related to COVID testing, vaccination, isolation, and quarantine. And we're really pivoting to other communicable diseases and respiratory illnesses. Every year we have that potential for the flu and RSV season. We had Mpox last summer. We're hoping it doesn't happen again this summer, but we're focusing our sites there. In FY24, our department's really transitioning to ongoing support of core services, kind of like getting back to that pre-pandemic design that we talked about. A pre-pandemic design that has all the lessons learned of COVID, of course. But we're seeing the end of the American Rescue Plan funded pandemic response. We're continuing evaluation of the effects of the pandemic and that response effort, as I talked about earlier, and we're increasing planning for the new emergencies, what's right around the corner. We need to be constantly vigilant so we don't get caught flat-footed when the next epidemic, pandemic, or other emergencies related to our natural world happen. Continued focus as well as continuing on our violence prevention work, as you saw investments earlier. Next slide. So if you look at the variance between where we were at in FY23 for the special funding, you can see that a lot of it is just the variance is the whole ticket, the whole line item. An exception of this would be our public health communicable disease community immunization program, but it should be noted that $1.7 million really is coming from state and federal funding to support that. And then the rest of them again we're phasing out. Next slide. And then again with this slide here, you can see that same thing. The variance FY23 to FY24 is pretty much the whole item, with the exception of line item 4019T, which is a CDC grant focused on COVID-19 health disparities at $2.6 million. Okay, next slide. And then on this slide, you can see that there's a $825,000 investment in Public Health's REACH COVID-19 flu vaccine supplement, and $449,000 in Public Health gun violence, and then $133,000 in the Early Assessment Support Alliance, ESA, using stimulus funding there. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, the only funding that's coming from county ARP funding or COVID-19 special funding is the $449K.
That's right. The rest is federal or state ARPA or COVID funding coming directly to the health department.
So going from what, 5.7 million total last year to 449K?
The reverse. So we're going.
Yeah. So, and then I think that's it for that slide. Yeah. All right. Thanks. And now next, Chantel is going to talk about state and federal impacts and other policy issues.
So this particular slide just really represents opportunity. These are burgeoning policies that are coming either out of state or federal legislature that we are making sure to follow and making sure that we are retaining a pulse on to make sure that there are key components of it to make sure that it can impact our funding. So there are, like Measure 110, of course, there is funding out of Measure 1115 and House Bill 2773, House Bill 3205. Infrastructure spend down, we have actually already been funded. There is 9.8 or in that arena, somewhere in that field that we have already that have been funded sometime in December of last year that we are placing on the books. I am actually going to Chicago next week to speak that has been awarded from the CDC. It is going to support our infrastructure to support clinicians. That is something that is coming from the federal government that we don't have to use out of county general funds in order to be able to support this infrastructure that we're talking about. I'm very pleased that a lot of this clinical action that we're going to be using over the next course of the year, we can direct our county general funds and other state funding and other funds to be able to support actions without having to use our infrastructure funds measures to move forward out of our funding here within the county. I'm sorry. We have the money from the federal government in order to be able to spend, and we won't be able to say like, okay, we're using our funds to be able to move this work forward. Medicaid redetermination and changes to the state medical examiner, that will be a cost to us on our side, and we still are determining how that's going to move forward. We wanted to make sure that it was on your radar. Our staff are following it closely. We don't know what yet it looks like, but we wanted to make sure that it was worth mentioning because we have yet to determine how it's going to look. So it was worth mentioning, but it is still, yet to be determined. So next slide.
All right, so next up, after we'll have some, obviously some time for questions now. Corrections Health will be following us today, and then the rest of the divisions will be reporting out on May 23rd. So I'm very excited to see what questions you have for us, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you so much. Really appreciate all this information. We'll go ahead and start with questions, and we do have Corrections Health who are still going to be presenting, as obviously we'll have all the divisions being able to present in more detail. So we will start with Commissioner Myron.
I thank you, and you will probably have to just cut me off because I do have a lot of questions and comments. So, and hopefully we can have more time at some point. But first of all, to the CBAC, I want to thank Rosalie. I don't know, is she still here? Oh, there you are. Really appreciate the time that you took and the entire CBAC team and all the work that you did and the expertise that you bring and background you bring to the conversation. So thank you. And I have concerns about the health department as a whole and how it is functioning and what is happening with it. Similar to some of what we've seen with the Joint Office of Homeless Services. And we haven't had leadership at the helm of the health department with experience of working directly on the front line of healthcare and or with deep experience of healthcare at the systems level since I came to the county. The revolving door has been epic, to say the least. And it's been at the level of the director, of the division directors, of the supervisors. I mean, if we counted the number of people rotating through our health department, it's unbelievable. And as someone who is a healthcare provider and has worked deeply in those systems for decades, saying that it's frustrating is an understatement beyond measure. And the COVID pandemic, granted, of course, that has put a strain on all that we have done, but it hasn't been an excuse. All of these things have been calls to action. We've seen escalating deaths of people living unsheltered outside and just kind of shrug our shoulders. We have seen people dying from overdoses. We've seen inequities, racial disparities that we keep elevating and saying our priorities and investing in, but the disparities stay or deepen and we're not having impacts, and yet we keep doing whatever it is we're doing. I was very hopeful with Ebony Clark. She was beginning to put together the pieces of a very fragmented, broken, dysfunctional system. And she was a partner in the behavioral systems transformation work that I'd initiated prior to the record turnover and revolving door at the health department. We were I think she was beginning to get some stuff together, and then she left for her arguably higher calling. And then Tom was coming in, though, to behavioral health. And I thought, okay, now we have an opportunity. He's great. And with his departure, I am just really concerned. And it's reflected in some of what I see in the budget. And, I'm concerned about loss of institutional knowledge, the lack of frontline and systems health experience at the leadership level, and going through this budget, looking at the work that's at the forefront of our mission. We need to be calling this out and addressing it. And this is not to say, I so appreciate, Valdez, your leadership and stepping in to this work, to this, what I've just described, your background in operations, your experience at the VA, your vision from that operational sense. I just have so much faith in you and your ability to direct operations and begin to get a handle on some of that aspect of this work. And Chantal, you bring such wonderful leadership and systems experience in your work in New Orleans, and all that you have done in your prior experience, administration, leadership. But the need sort of the institutional knowledge there as well in the background, and that leadership to put some of those pieces together. We will be hearing from the department, so we can go more into that. So I'll just finish. But public health, as we see, I feel that we've kind of lost the mission of what public health actually is in a lot of the work that we've done. Like, I'm not sure I could say what our public health mission has been at the county. I don't think it's been sufficient, for sure, in any of the core concepts of what define public health. We see fentanyl deaths skyrocketing, and not even a statement from the county about this. And 8 people died over the weekend. And how can that be a thing? What are we doing? Behavioral health. I can't even begin to describe how concerned I am. And we put some names and things and seem to try to rush to get them out there. But, I'll have comments around Beacon for sure, because that is not convinced that that's going to be something we should be investing in at that level from this standpoint. EMS, we're seeing things that, how are we requiring this 2 paramedic ambulance system when clearly that's not an approach that sort of is meeting what research says, as it is the case, as we're seeing like response times and risk to patients increasing, and all of this. So as we're going through the budget, I am looking critically at it, critically in the sense not of just like I want to heap criticism on it. It's critically from the standpoint of being constructive. What can we do to create a health department that becomes the leader that it can and should be, that can be transformative and that is addressing all of these huge issues?
Thank you, Commissioner Myron. Commissioner Jayapal.
Thank you all so much for the presentation. I feel like for the past, since I've been on the board anyway, every year has felt like a time of transition and a time of emergency and a time of crisis. And while the world has proclaimed the COVID pandemic to be over, I think that we know it's not, and I think the health department is at the forefront of dealing with the fact that it's not. And so this upcoming year is a real year of transition in terms of coming out of that and figuring out what comes next. I too am concerned about turnover in the health department at leadership levels, and I don't think we know what causes all of that. The world at large is expressing turnover everywhere. So it's just a fact, and I think I share some of the concerns that Commissioner Myron has expressed around that. So with all of that said, and without belaboring it, I do want to appreciate the transmittal letter and some of what you had to say, Valdez, about the way that you all approach putting the budget together. When I made comments about the joint office budget and also in response to the general presentation last week, I talked about a number of things, including outcomes and being more rigorous about things like outcomes. And also, I suggested to Dan Field that it might be time to take what I think of as a zero budgeting approach to the joint office budget, which is what we see when we see these budgets is an accretion and accumulation of what's happened in years past. And I think it's impractical to consider a zero budget for the entire county every year. That's just not feasible. But something that allows us to take a cleaner, newer look. The budget is just a piece of the plan. The budget isn't the plan. It's the operationalization of a plan, right? But taking that fresh look, I think in a lot of areas, maybe every area around the county, I think we're due for that. So I felt like I saw pieces of that in what you talked about and how you approach the budget. The fact that you didn't just do a constraint across everywhere equally. The fact that you looked at underspending, that's also something that I mentioned in my earlier introductory comments, was have we looked critically at consistent underspending? I'm going to set the joint office aside because that is a different set of issues. But I think even apart from that office, the question of whether there are consistent levels of underspending is one we need to address. And it looks like you've tried to take a look at that with vacancies, for example, being a piece of where's that underspending. And I really appreciate the fact that you've looked at that. I think those are my comments. Let me ask about the Medicaid waiver, if this is the appropriate place to ask that. When that funding becomes available, how we're working on integrating it, and will it free up general fund, and when can we expect to see those impacts, and what's the plan around that?
I'll say there is we have a work group that's coming together that's multi outside of the health department too, that's working on that. And then I think Chantel's going to share a thought, but also we realize we're in redetermination, and that's something that I didn't touch on in my opening remarks, is that we're taking that one county approach to work with. ICS is reaching out to their beneficiaries to make sure that they're getting the prompt to make sure that they don't get a disruption in care due to redetermination, but we're also addressing the needs of all the other community members that might be caught up in that are not directly included in the ICS population. So just wanted to talk from a redetermination standpoint, something I neglected to mention. I wanted to touch on that, but Chantel, did you want to add in the funding?
So just so I'm clear, I wasn't talking so much about the redetermination as I was about the waiver.
Yeah.
Right. So if I could say this, and I think to put it in a context, I think this is more so about a capacity issue. So we have turnover because we have a lot of vacancies because people get burned out. And people are getting burned out because we have, what I've seen when I first got here, a lot of vacancies, right? We have a lot of vacancies because we're not getting people in the door. We're not getting a lot of people in the door because we've invested very heavily in the clinical side. And I've been doing health administration all of my career. And if you don't invest in the clinical side, then we're not prepared for medical redetermination, we're not prepared for waiver, we're not prepared for the back end side. And I've done the back end side for a very long time. I came from a health department where there were 8 health directors prior to me arriving in the door. And we said, all right, the buck stops here. We're gonna put some consistency because that transition breeds uncertainty for staff. And then when people are uncertain, then they say, oh, I'm not sure if I really wanna stay. And then that bleeds people out the door. But if you have a lot of clinical staff and the clinical staff are not getting support, then they say, well, I need this in order to be able to do my job. I need this for billing. I need this. I need a whole bunch of other different things. Those are the things that create a lot of the transition, that create a lot of the uncertainty for staff, that we have to stop on that hemorrhaging side. And that's what we're working right now, and that's why you've heard me say throughout my presentation, we have to build the infrastructure. We have to build this solid foundation in order to support staffing. And that's what I've come in. I think to Ebony's point, and when she was here, that's why she brought in a deputy director of operations, because we have to build the foundational strategies in order to be able to stop a lot of the hemorrhaging that we see, in order to be able to support our clinical staffing. Clinical staffing needs support in order to be able to do a lot of the things that you see. So that's where we have to really kind of fix that, and that's where where you hear me saying this, oh yeah, we gotta fix retention. We gotta start at retention, because I don't want to focus so much on recruitment if we can't retain people. We get people in the door, and it is a revolving door because they get out. The medical waiver and the medical redetermination, we got to have the infrastructure in order to be able to be responsive and be prepared in order to do the billing side and to be able to get, the staff in place in order to get those people in the door in order to do the processing. That's what I'm really more concerned about, to be able to be responsive to that. So it is the revenue cycle process that I think that we can do, and we are going to hire the staff in order to be able to do that, but I got to have the infrastructure in place. So I don't want to harp on it like it's like, oh, you keep saying that, but I feel there's systemic issues that we have to be able to address, and I'm trying to get up to speed on my institutional knowledge in order to be able to be prepared for it. So I feel like I'm running a race in order to be able to say, like, I got to get up. So it is looking at our underspending. It is looking at where I stay up. Like we were emailing, Valdez and I were emailing at 11 o'clock last night because we are looking at like how do we beef up and how we are. This is every night for us because we're trying to be prepared and we are trying to be ready for the staffing in order to address a lot of these issues that you see.
I also want to be clear that I'm not putting this on your.
No. It's not. But
Yeah.
we feel charged.
Yeah.
But it is not just also to you. We have an obligation to the staff. That's where I am right now. It is more to the staff because they feel an uncertainty, and we want to make sure that we create that environment for them. I've seen the fruit of it. I've done it in New Orleans, and I see it possible here in Multnomah County, and I'm ready to run the race with the staff and be able to do that with them. So we can do it. It's possible. We're going to do it.
I'll just add a quick 2 seconds on the 1115 waiver, though. I'm representing the Health Department on the Health Share of Oregon board, and we're working closely with them on how the CCOs are going to be rolling out some of the new benefits with the 1115 waiver, and so we'll be at the forefront of the planning and rollout of those new benefits. And so I expect that we will keep the board informed of how that's shaping up, but we should expect to see new funding and funding that can free up county resources for housing and all of those social determinants of health costs that will now be a covered benefit. So we will keep you posted on all that.
I appreciate that. And Chantel, I have every confidence that both that you're running and sometimes feeling like you're running in place. And we've already had a chance to talk about some of the things you're working on. So, I appreciate all of that and appreciate the need for infrastructure. I mean, I do think that we often in public services, we get caught in this box of a public that says you're spending too much on infrastructure, and the fact that infrastructure is actually essential, and we don't hear anyone telling a business, you're spending too much on infrastructure, you're spending too much on keeping the lights on, right? So I appreciate all of that.
We're going to take the infrastructure grant as an opportunity, right? It is the great learning of the opportunity of the infrastructure grant to not use county general funds in order to be able to beef it up, in order to be able to sustain what we can do. So we are going to get creative, and we're going to roll out the plan to the chair, to the board, so that you can see it and see what we plan on doing with it.
So that's actually a good segue to the one other question I did want to ask, which is about that infrastructure grant. I wasn't clear on what it's going to. Are you saying we don't yet know what
We have it.
Okay.
We've been awarded that grant, and we are in the process. I'm going to yield to Wendy to talk about like how it's going to be rolled out. But we've already received a notification that it's already been received from the CDC.
But they're developing the budget that will go along with that, but it is directed towards department-wide infrastructure, so human resources capacity, communications capacity, all of that kind of infrastructure that both public health needs and the rest of the department. And so they're still in the process of developing that budget that then will be rolled out, and Chantel will be leading up that effort in particular, so that it's taking a public health department-wide perspective and not just exclusively sitting within the public health division.
We've been saying public health with a lowercase p.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation and certainly a staggering array of programs that you're responsible for. I wanted to mention that last night when we had a public hearing on the proposed budget, there was there were comments about praising the county for our COVID response, and obviously, most of that is the work that you all did, and so you should know that that's appreciated by the public. And then Chantel, I really appreciated the comments that you just made, because it does seem like a real vicious circle. You know, obviously, turnover is a problem in general in healthcare, and maybe we're experiencing a worse situation, but we're certainly not in isolation. And it really is a vicious circle when you're understaffed, you're overworked. You know, obviously some people just can't take it anymore and are going to leave. But then when you see people at the top gone, that's really apparent. So, yeah, but it's great to hear that you're committed to working on it, and I'm like others have said, confident that's going to succeed. So the ARPA funds, I wanted to ask a little bit about that. Obviously, most of what's going away are the COVID funds, but it looked like there was a fairly significant reduction due to the ARPA funds leaving in gun violence prevention. And I wondered, is that shifting somewhere else, or what is happening with that?
It's still there. The chair funded the large behavioral health gun violence program with County General Fund this year. So that's why it didn't show up on the ARPA slides, but you'll see it in the new County General Fund investments.
So that is being.
Yes, it's continuing.
Yeah. And then for there are still some ARPA funds left in this proposed budget, but those will probably be gone in the future too. I assume the whole program will go away. So are there plans then to be able to replace those as well? And I mean, maybe you haven't looked that far ahead yet, but.
Well, I think, this was like a big downshifting year. We didn't go all the way down, but, as we start this process back up, this fall, I'm sure we're going to be, looking ahead to how do we maintain the programs that we need to keep maintaining, even though these funds might not yet be available, or might not continue to be available.
Well, and that does raise a question. So are we projecting funds that we're sure we have those funds?
Yes, those funds are secured. Yes.
That's good. Okay, I know we're going to get into specifics about some of the program areas in the future. So I think for today, that's all I had.
Thank you. Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here today and for the presentation. I guess I had some kind of higher arching questions, and I know that we're certainly impacted by ballot measure 110, but at some point maybe I'd like to get a better understanding of that program and how it impacts us, and therefore what should we be advocating for, either through our government relations. The testimony that was given today, we are at a tipping point. And talking about fentanyl, and that brought up another question: is what is our public health response? And I know presentations later, but what is our response to the fentanyl crisis? And I don't know if you can talk broadly about that, or maybe later.
No, we formulated in the fall kind of a banded together group of folks from public health, from behavioral health and corrections health, our health officers group, all across the department. And we kind of did we would call like a current state approach of just like seeing, and we had everyone identify all the different program offers and all the work that's happening about that, so we could assess like where that's at right now. And there's been work that's been happening for years, of course, but then pulling it all together and looking at it with that one department approach. And so our next steps on that is that while we're continuing to work and do the work every day, we have an upcoming in-person strategic planning event where we're going to pull all that together and say, okay, what's working and we need to do more of, what's not working that we probably should do less of, it doesn't work anymore, and what are the things we're not doing at all that we either need to do or we need to partner with others to do, be it a CBO, be it another department at the county, or be it somebody else. So that's coming soon, and I think maybe this summer you'll probably be hearing more about that specific, it probably will be a dedicated presentation about that.
Great, I look forward to that, Valdez. I think I've seen some response about like secondhand smoke from fentanyl. So I think obviously that would be great information for you all to review with us once again. So, there has been a huge amount of turnover, which we realize, but it is just the nature. We can complain and be dissatisfied about the way the world is at this moment in time, but it's not going to change anything. And while there has been a turnover in leadership, we have new leadership, people like you all that are willing and able to step up in a time of great need. We have people that have decades of experience, like Wendy, and many staff that have been here. So I just don't want this to be gloom and doom. We have great challenges, no doubt, but I'm confident that I've seen the commitment from Chantel and from Valdez and from Wendy and many of the people that I meet in the health department that people are committed to this work. So I just want to call that out. And also, Valdez, I appreciated you thinking more strategically about, and Wendy, how you can take maybe individual programs and then create them, revamp them in a new way that serves the health department as a whole versus an individual department. And Chantel, going back to, I think you're spot on, is that, fixing the infrastructure, yes, people are, if we don't retain people, okay, this is my sales background, is that, you can sell all day long, but if you are losing people, business out the back door, it doesn't matter. Retention is huge. And so we will never catch up unless we fix that infrastructure. So, and I don't know if you all have anything that you'd like to respond.
No, that's really where we're talking in our efforts. I mean, I said, as much as I'm very excited to be here and I love being in Multnomah County, I think it's a very peaceful and tranquil place, and I'm very happy to be here. We can't bring everyone from outside. I really want to make sure that we retain the beautiful people who are here. I'm very happy to be working with the staff, and I met so many great people, but we need that institutional knowledge. The learning curve is too steep, and it is too costly to keep bringing new people in. I appreciate the lessons learned, but in a department of nearly 1,600 people, we cannot keep the attrition rates as high as we have. And we have to invest in our people. There are opportunities, there's program, there's House Bill, 2773 that's coming that I feel like it's gonna be an attraction and a draw for us to be able to invest in the people here. I also wanna make some changes in succession planning. We have to build our bench. And I wanna make sure that we do that. That builds our staffing, that builds up, like how we promote from within and we build up the people here within the county. That also tells the citizens that there is a home for you here in Multnomah County, and that's how we build up our whole community. So we gotta do that, and we gotta make some strides. So we're gonna do it.
And the only thing I would add to what Chantel said is that, that expression, culture eats strategy for lunch. We've doing strategic planning. We've got a strategic house you'll be seeing soon that's going to drive that budgeting process. So it's not just budgeting based on what did we do last year? Should we add 10%? It'll have a strategic plan with pillars that weight that budgeting process that's coming in the fall. But to the point, if you look at the WESP and what the imperative of the WESP calls for, the style of leadership that it calls for, and what employees want out of leaders and out of an organization, out of a culture, it really is like rooted in like transformational leadership with that equity lens. And I think that regardless if you have folks that are rotating at the top or coming in new, every day I meet folks that have been at the health department for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, and those are the folks that, if we have the wisdom, being transformational leadership mindset, to listen to those folks that have the best ideas, that do the work every day on the front lines, not only are they going to stay and the people around them are going to stay, but we are going to be able to do the good work, and because culture does eat strategy for lunch, we just got to be wise enough to listen to the folks on the front lines that know what's best and what's needed for this community, and that's what public health is. So.
Thank you, Valdez. Thank you all. I really appreciate your commitment to this work, and I look forward to continuing to support your important work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to just first of all thank you, especially Valdez and Chantel, who have stepped up and stepped in as we've had transitions in leaderships. And I don't want it to be glossed over, the fact that we have faced the largest and most deadly health emergency in our lifetimes over the past few years, and that have had a serious impact across our health department, across the entire field of health. And it was that way for years that people were dealing with it. And there's naturally burnout, there's naturally, people rethinking, what that means as they put themselves, their health and the health of their families on the line in terms of responding to the public needs. So I have so much appreciation for the way that our health department has really stepped up and stepped in. And we know that it wasn't just about COVID. There were multiple concurrent crises and emergencies that were happening where we had people really step in ways that were unimaginable before, a few years ago. And so I just want to say how much I have appreciated your collaboration and your leadership as we look forward to some of these really big opportunities that we do have in front of us for this next year, including, some of the investments that we're seeing from the state, including the Medicaid waiver, including, some the system-wide behavioral health work that we are able to do. And I think there's a lot for us to look forward to. And in terms of the, I talked to Chair Kafoury, even I think before COVID, about just turnover at leadership level. I mean, you do see that, I think, in government, but for the health department specifically, we have an active search for a director that is moving forward. We have an active search for the behavioral health division director that is currently open. So, there wasn't much of a break between, recognizing that there were vacancies and moving to actually put those positions placed. But I am very grateful for not just how you have stepped up, but people have stepped up in the behavioral health division and across the board to help fill in, and also to give space for people who need to step back and take some time to recuperate from the last few years as well. And I think I'm a huge proponent of having the right infrastructure and investment at an organizational level to support the work that we need to do. You have to have that really solid, strong framework in order for that to happen. And having come from the corporate world, it is something that's required because a part of it is building that culture and that organization that people want to be that and feel supported. And one of the things that coming into this role as chair was I want Multnomah County to be an employer of choice across our organization, across our departments, and that includes the health department. So just really appreciate this and look forward to a lot more conversation about the health department budget in the next couple of weeks. So thank you. And with that, we will move on to our next budget work section, which is delving into one of those areas, corrections health. Please come on
Thank you.
down.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And before you get started, I will say we do plan on going till 12:30, so we do have some time, but just recognize that we do need to also have time for commissioners' questions too for the presentation. All right, thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. Super glad to be here and honored to have this space to present to you all. My name is Michael Biero, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director for Corrections Health. Today, presenting with me is Rachel Lee, and she'll introduce herself when she presents. As we have done in the past and continue to do, we want to always make a clear point throughout our presentation that as we go through each section, it has been done intentionally with equity and cultural considerations embedded in each and every decision we made along the way. Next slide, please. Today we'll be going through our budget approach, significant changes, some program highlights, as well as general information on state and federal policies and how they impact our division, Corrections Health. Next slide, please. I really love this slide. It's a picture of some of our staff across MCDC, MCIJ as well. And Corrections Health is made up of a diverse cross-section of staff across the 3 sites, working 24/7, 365, rain, sleet, snow, heat, we're always there. The classifications include our outstanding administrative staff, top-notch providers, exceptional mental health consultants, incredible certified medication aides, medical assistants, and health assistants, our dynamic dental team, and the PLS community health nurses. Next slide, please. Well, it is said that your focus determines your reality. And therefore, it is of critical importance for us as Corrections Health to acknowledge the historical harm done to the BIPOC community by the criminal legal system that we work within. We are also really excited and thankful that for the first time, thanks to our director's office, our division will have an equity manager that will be able to lift up this critical work within our division. Our division has worked hard over the years to focus on client-centered care using the best evidence-based practice, which has led to our ability to tackle SUD issues in our population in effective ways. It's important to note that Corrections Health provides direct medical, dental, and behavioral health care for adults and youth in custody in the Multnomah County jails and for the youth at the detention facility at the Donald D. Long building. Excuse me. While most of the other jail healthcare services are contracted out by for-profit organizations, Corrections Health is a division within the health department that closely works with public health, the health officer, ICS, and behavioral health leaders to provide top quality level of public health care to our clients. And while we work within the jail system, we believe strongly that everyone deserves quality health care. We have developed strong relationships with OHSU to provide OB and psych services. With the advocacy of OHSU co-director of the fetal surgery program, Dr. Andrew Chan, we recently started the process to purchase an ultrasound machine to detect early pregnancy within the jails for the first time. Additionally, and importantly, Corrections Health continues to be accredited by the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare and encourages our leadership and staff to attend biannual conferences that foster information sharing and growth. It is impossible to ignore the racial statistics for the population of those in custody that we serve. And Multnomah County and the Corrections Health leadership understands that it is a direct correlation to systemic racism in America. Many in our leadership team have personal understanding of this impact and know the importance of hiring a workforce that is reflective of our patients in order to provide culturally specific services. The impacts of the criminal legal system are far-reaching, and data has shown that those involved in the justice system are often high utilizers of the emergency care system and other social services, and that those who engage in treatment when in custody have a higher chance of continuing that care when released. When clients are connected with care in custody and have a strong care coordination plan, including housing, they are more likely to engage in services in the community. Next slide, please. This slide provides some detail on the breakdown of the programs within Corrections Health, with MCDC, as you can see, being the largest from a cost perspective. We have multiple programs that run out of each site, as shown, working together to provide the appropriate care needed. The programs include, but are not limited to, medical care such as chronic disease clinics, substance and alcohol withdrawal management, behavioral health services, dental services, and transition services for adults and youth who are getting released into the community as well. Next slide, please. As with everything we do within Corrections Health, our budget approach is one that we go into each year with a perspective, again, of racial equity and diversity building in our staff, as they are the foundation of all we do and who we are. Staff represent the largest portion of our budget annually at about 80% of our general fund allocation. Professional services, which includes pharmaceuticals and outside specialty appointments, represent the other 20% of the allocation. In particular, it's always important to note how little control we have of pharmaceuticals. The necessary treatment for individuals requiring specific expensive medications for HIV, hemophilia, syphilis, or certain behavioral health conditions often results in increased cost. Now, despite all of our efforts, the variability in demand and cost of care provided in the community impact the budget of Corrections Health. As we continue to pay for the increased outside specialty healthcare and medication costs, staffing remains the only area which Corrections Health has the ability to make reductions. To meet the constraint this year, only positions that were vacant or hard to fill were considered for elimination. This doesn't mean that there are not positions that are needed, but the constraint had to be met. Corrections Health is proud to be accredited by the NCCHC, which is the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare, and all efforts are made to ensure we maintain our accreditation standards with a focus of best practice and appropriate resource allocation. Next slide, please. And for this next fiscal year, Corrections Health did not request any ARP funds. And as mentioned earlier, our infrastructure in this next fiscal year is built to allow us to better support our staff, as well as serve the adults and youth in custody more effectively. As you can see, the FTE increase includes the nurse augmentation that we got approved this year, which Rachel will get into more detail about in a later slide. The total budget percent change also includes rising in healthcare costs, cost of living increases year over year, as well as inflation. I will now hand it over to Rachel to discuss the next 2 slides.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Rachel Lee. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Senior Operations Manager for Corrections Health. Given the recent conversation, note I have been here over 10 years with Corrections Health, very proudly. I started as an office assistant. As Mike has said, the foundation and heartbeat of Corrections Health is our employees and the exceptional work that they do every day. The dedication, care, and resilience that they show is unmatched, and we want to thank the Chair for supporting our proposal to add 19 new nursing positions across all 3 of our facilities. The total cost of this investment is $2.7 million, $1.5 million of which was internally reallocated by reducing our overtime, temp, and on-call budget. And we are thankful for the funding of the remaining $1.2 million. Next slide. So we chose this approach to address our staffing needs because it has been proven to work. When we visited King County Jail Health a few years ago, which is a very similar healthcare model to ours, where the county health department provides the care to adults and youth in custody, they showed that by increasing the number of nurses assigned to every shift, they were able to staff their facility appropriately, allowing for call-outs, training, and orientation shifts and vacations without relying on mandates and overtime. For those who may not be aware, a mandate is when an employee is told that they must stay and work the following 8-hour shift instead of going home after they had already worked their original 8-hour shift. As the healthcare providers in the facility, Corrections Health is required to have a certain number of nurses on site 24/7 to provide critical care. Currently, Corrections Health has enough nursing FTE to staff what we refer to as our minimum staffing levels. This means that if employees call out, take vacation, or we have vacancies, we have to rely on someone picking up an overtime shift or mandating an employee to meet our minimum staffing. The additional 15.6 FTE will allow us to add 2 nursing positions to each shift at our adult facilities and 1 nurse per shift to our juvenile facilities. We recognize that recruiting is still a challenge, so to address this initial heavy lift, we will be hiring a limited duration Corrections Health position that focuses on partnering with health department recruiting to hire and onboard these positions. Before COVID hit, Corrections Health built strong relationships with local nursing schools and were regularly attending recruitment events. This resulted in us being fully staffed across all 3 facilities in early 2020. So we have done it, and it is possible. After a tough 3 years, we are starting that work again and are actively hosting students and have partnered with Health HR to attend recruiting events. So this picture on the slide is our interim Deputy Health Director, Chantel Reed, and amazing HR recruiter, Sonar Bernez, who attended the National Conference on Correctional Healthcare this past spring. Health HR recruiters also attended and had recruitment booths at the National Conference for Advanced Practice Clinicians. And I will hand it back to Mike.
Thanks, Rachel. Next slide, please. So we'll touch on some of our program highlights here. And there are a lot of stigmas and preconceived notions that come along with providing healthcare within a correctional institution. We continuously challenge those stereotypes by providing high-quality care that benefits not only our clients, but our entire community. During COVID, Corrections Health was able to vaccinate adults and youth in custody, not only protecting them while they were in custody, but also upon release back to their communities, protecting their families and friends. Corrections Health also provides free STD testing and treatment and works with our communicable disease team in ICS to follow up with people in the community when needed. And while we work to connect clients with care after release, we know that we are often the only medical, dental, and behavioral health care that some of these clients will see, and we build that responsibility into the care that we provide. In March of 2023, Corrections Health served its first dental patient at the Donald E. Long Clinic, which was in large part due to the advocacy of our dental director, Dr. Len Barazzini, seen in the picture there. And as Len stated in a recent article, and I quote, "The situation is dire for lower income individuals, and minors in detention centers and foster homes. This opportunity to provide dental services at the Youth Detention Center will allow the county to advance oral health for vulnerable youth to improve their confidence and well-being and assist them to more easily re-engage society with regards to their dental health, end quote. I'm going to hand it over to Rachel for the next one.
Next slide, please. So I feel an overwhelming sense of pride and privilege to be able to speak with you all and highlight the truly phenomenal work our employees and leaders do. Choosing to work within a flawed and oppressive system is a choice to wake up and walk side by side with those in our community who are stuck within it. The employees who make this choice every day truly are proof that not all superheroes wear capes. All Corrections Health employees are considered essential workers and required to show up to work despite county closures. But more than that, our employees are dedicated to providing services to a population that cannot access care anywhere else. This winter, Corrections Health employees and leadership booked hotel rooms, stayed overnight at the jail, drove 8+ hours to and from work, stayed at each other's houses, walked, and even cross-country skied to ensure they could show up to work and take care of our patients. During severe weather, including 100+ degrees days this summer, Corrections Health employees ensured that resources were available to clients releasing from the downtown detention center. Often clients are booked in during the day and released at night, or taken into custody in the summer and released in the winter. Our transition team ensures people are able to leave custody and transition back to the community with clothing, shoes, and supplies they need to be safe, but also, as our Transition Services Program Supervisor Ed Orlando Ortiz says, get to their next best spot with dignity. And that's Ed on the left and Darcel Hicks, a community health worker, on the right. This year, Corrections Health continued our partnership with MCSO, providing medicated supported recovery to adults and youth in custody prior to release. We continue to strengthen partnerships with public health to expand services and think about a different way of providing care during this crisis in our community. In 2021, Multnomah County experienced an all-drug fatal overdose rate 40 times higher than that nationwide, and individuals released from Multnomah County jails were 15 times more likely to overdose from opioids within a week after release. Providing our clients with the treatment, tools, and support to continue recovery after they release from custody will increase the chance that they succeed and that they survive. I will pass it back to Mike.
Thanks, Rachel. Next slide, please. So this past year, Corrections Health has had some things happen that have significant impacts to our population. The Mossman order, for example, has had an impact that is not even fully realized yet, but that greatly affects our behavioral health needs within the facilities and has increased the acuity of the behavioral, the acuity of those needing psychiatric care in jail. MCSO also recently moved over 50 adults from MCDC to Inverness Jail to help to mitigate some of the effects of the order. And then work continues to be done with partners including behavioral health, the DA's office, the Defense Bar, Portland Police, and local judges, among others, to try and come up with solutions around the Mossman order. Fentanyl has become the #1 safety concern for staff within the jails. Since the beginning of this fiscal year on July 1, 2022, Corrections Health has had over 42 instances of naloxone administration, oftentimes with clients needing multiple doses, up to 8 doses, which is unheard of. We have had sentinel events related to illicit substances, which are harder and harder to keep out of the jail population. And so we continue to work closely with public health and the behavioral health teams to brainstorm how to best deal with this current crisis. And we all feel that it will only get worse, and that this requires us to act perhaps in a way that we have never done before. I'm not sure what that is, but we need to do something different. While Corrections Health does provide healthcare to adults and youth in custody, we often send our patients out for specialty care or follow-up care that we cannot provide on site, or when there is an emergency. Corrections Health pays the cost for those services. In 2022, the rate of claimants needed for outpatient services decreased by 10.7%. However, the cost per encounter actually increased. This is reflective of the rise in healthcare costs nationwide as well. As it relates to Medicare 1115 and the effect and impact it would have on our population, we are not quite sure yet, because as of right now, we do not charge for any medical or behavioral health care or dental care within the jails. But we are actively engaged in work groups at the state and county level so that we will be prepared as decisions are made. Next slide, please. And I think we can just go to the next one as well. So these next two slides will just basically detail the areas that we looked at for the general fund reductions. So you can look at that with some of that detail. And then go to the next slide, please. And this kind of details a little bit more of the staffing augmentation. Again, thank you so much, Chair, for that. It's going to, I think, make a massive impact. And also for the nurse practitioner for behavioral health, that's a position we critically need in the jail, so we're really thankful for that. Next slide, I think. Yep, I think that's the last one. That's Yana. She is one of our nurses, works at the Donald E. Long building. Again, I really love this picture. When everybody else was home, I remember being at Dell that day, and I walked into the break room, and there was skis there, and I was like, what in the world? And apparently she skied to work to make sure the youth there were served. So our staff is absolutely phenomenal. And with that, our presentation is done, and we are happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Thank you both so much for this information. We will go to Commissioner Jayapal for questions.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you both so much. That is a great picture and just so emblematic of what you're describing. I think just a couple questions. Could you talk a little bit more about the impact of the Mossman decision? I mean, increased acuity, transferred some folks. Are there other things that we are or should be doing in terms of services to address the issue? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we're talking through right now. We were working closely with the forensic diversion team, with Krista Jones and her team, to try and problem solve around this, because the aid and assist docket individuals in particular, it's a big problem. People are coming back from the state hospital sometimes with little or no notice. People will show back up at the jail, and then we have to figure out what to do with them. So I think some of the biggest pieces and impacts have to do with the community providers that are out there. So if someone gets released from the state hospital, there's very little in the way of a workflow that allows for them to go into areas that, will take someone that has all of the co-occurring conditions that they have. You have to have just, so many diagnoses for them to let you in a lot of the treatment facilities, which is really difficult to actually manage. So I think there's that piece of it, because as I think you all know, the jail is not a therapeutic environment. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of the folks end up when they come back from the state hospital. So the impacts we're just now beginning to see the beginning of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that the issue at large is a systemic issue. I guess and you are dealing with the consequences of all of those systemic failures, and that is the reality that we are having to deal with those consequences. So, I think what you've said is we don't yet know the full impacts. Do you anticipate that there's going to be a budgetary impact, for example? Again, coming back to a need for additional services, or?
I mean, that's knowing that folks will come back to jail regardless. That's one of the reasons why that restoration, for example, for the nurse practitioner position was so critical. So we can actually meet the need of those people who are coming back, because we have to understand that the systems are not built to deal with that population coming back to us. So we are very thankful for that position to be added, and also, just pointing out that it is a critical position to deal with, some of those effects as well.
Okay. And then medication-assisted treatment, and I know we've had conversations about this before, so, if I'm asking, I apologize. It sometimes takes a while for understanding to sink in. We now provide, which I so appreciate, we provide treatment to people as they are exiting. How far back do we go, and, what are the challenges or obstacles to providing it even earlier rather than just before somebody's exiting?
The length of stay issue is the biggest challenge. Because people come in and out of the jail very quickly. As they come in, we will put them on protocol and, get them initiated on treatment to detox in a safe way. We have, over the years, worked to be very liberalized in how we score. We use a COWS scoring system to initiate treatment. And for the first time ever, we start treatment at 7. At a score of 7, and I'm not going to get into all the details here, but that's a very low score compared to what it used to be in the past, because we don't want to see people start to suffer before we initiate treatment. Now, for folks who are leaving, we have the communication with the sheriff's office that, some of their counselors are able to say, hey, this person's leaving in a couple of days. Can they be seen? Can we initiate treatment? We can get that done. We are continuing to build that program with that transition services program that Rachel talked about. Will play a big role as we build that team out to be able to get people on treatment. We are also hopeful we are working with, as Valdez talked about, the one department approach. Some of the things that we're talking about is like the COSAP grant that we are hoping we can even pilot Sublocade, for example, that, they can get the injection, that lasts for 30 days post-release versus them having to keep going to the pharmacy to get their prescriptions refilled. That will hopefully, see better clinical outcomes for the folks when they release into the community.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you had to say about we have to do something substantially different, because what we're seeing is something substantially different. And I know Valdez talked about strategic planning. I'm assuming Corrections Health is part of that strategic planning around how we're going to respond to this. And I will say that I do understand that strategic planning takes a while. The summer feels like a long time away. So, that I think that doesn't necessarily reflect the urgency of the situation and of what people are asking of us. And I understand that it takes time, but I'm just inserting that note of caution. That does seem like a long time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, thank you for the presentation. This is a really tough area to work in, and you have to be really dedicated, obviously, to do this work. I assume that you're dealing with people that just have probably not had health care or dental care at all, probably. Right. And so the needs must be enormous. I wanted to ask, so are there a lot of unfilled positions? I heard that you're making some I know this isn't specifically the budget, but that you're making some scheduling changes to go to 12-hour shifts, and how is that going to help?
Yeah, so we have been dealing with vacancies like everywhere in the health department, but recently we've seen an increase in the number of applications we're receiving. For specifically, I'll talk to, all of our positions, but I'll talk to our nursing positions because those are the positions that were added. Because our nurses are the ones who we're provided to have them on site 24/7, and they can be mandated to stay, so we focus there. And we've seen an increase recently in our last two, what we call eligible lists. So the number of applicants and nurses who have applied to work in Corrections Health has gone up. We've also been working with staffing agencies to fill those vacancies, and we've already had a few of those nurses stay on as regular employees. And that used to actually be a really good recruiting tool for us before COVID, and people could work in other areas of the health department. They've come back to Corrections Health and are staying on. And so, it might seem like, we have vacancies and we're adding these new positions, but as people transition out of COVID, we're seeing more people apply, and we're hoping that if we focus on that, we'll not only fill the vacancies that we have, but providing the infrastructure and the stability where people can say, I want to work in a place where I'm not getting mandated every single day, and I can take vacation, and I can actually invest in education and orientation and learn new skills. That's going to make people want to stay and increase our retention as well. I think I answered your question, maybe.
So because I imagine mandatory overtime is probably the reality for a lot of people in healthcare, whether they're working at hospitals or whether they're working in corrections. Yeah. That's problem, and I'm sure nobody loves that at all. So.
No, I think last year, and I apologize, I forgot to bring the number, but I think we mandated around 548 times, I believe, which is, exceptional, and it burns out staff very quickly.
It's a high number, and then for any individual, it's probably a lot of instances. So it's hard on people's family life and in general. And so the problem is probably turnover as well as, it's heartening to hear that the applications are up, but people staying and retention is probably a concern as well.
Yeah, we've lost some of our, we call our senior nurses throughout COVID, but I would say we've worked, I've been there over 10 years, and there are some people that have been there since I've been there. And it's just a very dedicated group of people. And not that, people leave for their own reasons and very different reasons and have retired. But I know that the folks that we have are really invested in us. They're excited about the staffing augmentation because they know it's going to bring them stability, and I think that gives them hope that they can continue to work here for the long term, but also that it increases the level of care we're able to provide, because if you don't have people working to burn out, then they're able to work and invest in more programs and do more preventative care and do things that excite them about the work. So I think increasing these positions will also increase our retention.
Great. Okay, that's all I had today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stegman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mike and Rachel, for the presentation. Just along those same lines, I am really thrilled to hear that you'll be getting additional staffing to address all the things you just mentioned, Rachel. And it's really exciting to see that you're getting a correction health recruiting position, so even better. Mike, you had mentioned something. What was the number of naloxone doses that had been administered?
So we've administered about, like I said, we have 42 instances of naloxone since July 1, but of each of those is its own entity for different people.
Right.
Unfortunately, the average when we do administer it right now is about 4 or 5 times needing administration of naloxone, to where we had to actually change. So the typical dose for naloxone is 4 milligrams per dose, but we had to shift to the 8 milligram dosing in the jails because of how many times we're having to do it because of what we are seeing with fentanyl and the issues that we're having. Because in the past, when people are on benzos or other kind of opioids, and we administer 1 dose, they come to, or 2 doses at the most. This we've seen up to 8 doses, given to an individual to try and get them revived. It's unprecedented what we are seeing as it relates to that.
And what is the timing? Are these individuals that are being newly admitted, or are they folks that have been there for a while, or is it a mix?
It's both. We have people that come into the intake area, and we're seeing that happen. We're seeing people, on the 2nd or 3rd day of detox, that happens. And we've also seen, unfortunately, because if people come in custody and they have substance use disorder, they get stabilized, their tolerance drops while they're in the jails, and then because somehow it's getting in, they take something maybe that they thought they were used to, and the impacts are far more significant for them when they do that. So it is affecting, the longer term folks as well.
And I would guess that you provide some type of education. I mean, do you think that most folks that that you work with, like, do they have a basic understanding? Are they off? I mean, that I hear that
Yes.
happens frequently.
Yeah, we do, and the nurses do such a phenomenal job of educating us, the adults in custody and the youth in custody as well. We have also, though, recently, we're in the process of working with Jessica's team, Jessica Guernsey, Kelsey Young, and Tyler Swift. We'll be trying to get some of the harm reduction folks to come in the jail to provide additional education for the folks, because it's the same people that they see in the needle exchange sites that are in custody as well. So we're trying to, again, that kind of joint approach, because we're dealing with the same population, and the education push we feel is going to be significant in addressing the issues that we're seeing.
I'll just add to that, everyone who gets referred to our medicated supported recovery to get on meds prior to release does meet with our transition services planner's nurse to go over what the medication will do, to go over the drop in tolerance and all of those things. We did do some research on the numbers because it is a crisis, and we want to assess what we're doing and is it working. And part of the issue, to Commissioner Jayapal's question, is that we're finding that not everybody's following up after release. So we can start them in custody, we can get people on treatment, we can give education, but we're really working with public health to say, what do we need to do to follow up with people afterwards? Because if the connection's not there, and the community resources that they're not following up with them, then we're just going to go through the same cycle again. So I wanted to make sure that that's an area we're looking at, to make sure we're not just continuing to do the same thing, but is what we're doing effective.
I appreciate that, Rachel, because I'm trying to figure out. I mean, we've talked to other corrections folks who are saying people access drugs through the mail, and so I'm just wondering, from your perspective, from a health perspective, what are you seeing? I mean, I have a hard time understanding or accepting how this happens so frequently in our jails.
And that's what's challenging for us right now, is it's unprecedented. We were both at the jail on Sunday, dealing with similar issues when we get called in, because when an emergency is called, you don't know what you're going to see. But more and more often now, we're seeing severe outcomes compared to what we have seen historically. So it's a challenging time for us right now.
And we've asked, and we've called for, and internally we're doing we realize this is a crisis. It feels like a crisis. It's kind of felt like a crisis to us for a while. Like something is happening, and overdoses are increasing, and we're using more naloxone than we ever have before. So we are looking at what are we doing, and is it working? And historically, this isn't the first time in our community and in the nation that we've seen this rise. And so what can we do a little bit differently? And we do feel that urgency. Because we're seeing it every single day.
Well, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your commitment, and please extend my appreciation to your entire staff. This is incredibly hard work, and I'm just grateful that there are individuals like you who are excited and committed to go serve our most vulnerable population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Myron.
Thank you. Thanks so much to both of you. This was a great presentation, and your team is truly amazing. There are just a few things reflecting on some of the information you've provided and what some of my colleagues have mentioned, and talking about the number, the amount of naloxone that needs to be administered to bring someone back after a fentanyl overdose. It can be ridiculous amounts that just in the old days you never would have even imagined. This is one of the reasons, going back to it was some of the health department outcomes and measurements that were listed. This isn't a program offer. This is a little of an aside, but to think about in our program offers, like one of the outcomes or outputs was number of naloxone doses administered, and that's not counting. That's nothing. That doesn't mean anything. So really having built in, this is not with you, so sorry, I shouldn't. But it's important to be recognizing again the relationship between what we're looking at as our outcomes versus what we actually, what has clinical meaning, especially in health, is really important. I also, when it did strike me, again, I think you alluded to this. This is not you. This is broader health department. But Commissioner Jayapal mentioned, and it really struck me, having a fentanyl briefing in summer about fentanyl and what the plan is how many people will die before then. I mean, 8 in one weekend alone. I mean, we can't wait till the summer. This is a crisis, so hopefully we can look at taking some action more urgently. And with your team at the table, obviously, is so important. I want to call out the transition teams, which is brilliant, and it is, it's such a great approach to looking at one of the most dangerous times. This sort of transitions are always the most dangerous times as people are leaving jail and going to who knows what. And that collaboration with DCJ and John McVeigh and that team is wonderful. So anything that builds on that, I'm all in. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for your work.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank both of you for all your work, and the team that was working on this budget. And I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that has been done and the way that the staff and the employees have been showing up during all of the time with the staffing challenges. And I am really hopeful that the additional staffing model is going to be really helpful with this. But I do want to thank you because you brought forward a very clear, well-researched, and well-argued justification for the additional positions, and including what the impacts would be, and also helped figure out the way to pay for it with some internal savings. And that was super helpful in making the decision. So I'm just sharing that because you guys did a great job. And if other folks want, are having similar asks in the future, this is a good model to use. But it is, we want to be partners in this work as we're looking to how to give the best medical care possible to the people who are in such vulnerable positions. So just appreciate that. Thank you so much. That concludes today's budget work session. We will be back here on Tuesday, May 23rd at 9 a.m. to continue the Health Department budget work sessions. And with that, we are adjourned.